Oh, excuse me. Hi there. So we are going to talk super quickly about canonization. Canonization, if you want more detail, I'm going to kind of just go some supplementary information over it. It is focused upon throughout chapter 1 of your textbook. Chapter 1 actually does a really great job, does a really awesome job of making it not too overwhelming for you. So that's cool to know. So first of all, let's go ahead and let's talk quickly. What is canon? Canon, the list of scripture books that we find to be authoritative. And so what today is canon? As you all hopefully know by now, because I think this is maybe the third time I've repeated it, and I know you've probably heard it a bunch of times in class. It is the 27 books of the New Testament. So that's what canon is. Let's talk a little bit about what is in the New Testament. We have the four Gospels, Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. 2, we have as well Acts, or as it's otherwise known, Acts of the Apostles. Then we have, I think, 21 epistles, or letters to the churches. So it's clear that the epistles make up the majority of New Testament canon, and they are some of the oldest documents in the New Testament. Many of these epistles written by Paul and by other people are older than some of the Gospels even. So keep those in mind. They're quite old, and they take up a lot of the New Testament. And then you have the one book of Revelation. So that's what you have in the New Testament. That is what canon is. Now, let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about how we know what we know. So, throughout time, as you can imagine, documents become lost. Jesus lived over 2,000 years ago. So many of the documents about him have disappeared over time. But there are some old documents that we discover and we learn from. And many of these documents that are old and we find and we learn from, we find that they kind of make their way into canon, or they influence canon. And so what we have here is, for example, Nag Hammadi. There are 13 very old scrolls found. They're very important because I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to read this. You can find this on page 4 of your textbook. So if you actually want to go ahead and pause this video and go ahead and grab up your textbook and read along with me, I'll be reading under the bold red heading that says Other Early Christian Writings, and it is the one, it is toward the middle of the second paragraph there, under that bold heading that says Other Early Christian Writings. And you'll see the word bolded, Nag Hammadi, in that page. So go ahead, pause me, and leaf your way through your textbook so you can follow along with me. Welcome back. So let's go ahead and read this here. Some of these writings clearly stand at odds with those in the New Testament, talking about some of the old scriptures that we found. Some of them appear to have been used as sacred scripture by certain groups of Christians. So that's saying that different Christians, before canonization, they would all kind of read their own things. You know, they didn't have one set list at the beginning of books to read. The most spectacular find occurred in 1945 near the town of Nag Hammadi, Egypt, where some peasants digging for fertilizer accidentally uncovered a jar containing 13 fragmentary books in leather bindings. They have 52 treaties altogether, written in ancient Egyptian. They were manufactured in the mid-4th century, so they're incredibly old. Before this discovery, we knew that these books existed, but we didn't know what was in them. What kind of books are they? Included in the collection are epistles, apocalypses, and collections of secret teachings. Yet more intriguing are the several gospels it contains, including one written by the Apostle Philip, Judas, someone who early Christians believe is Jesus' twin brother. So you can see that this was in 1945, and there were many old documents from the 4th century found here. Many old Gospels that are not part of canon. So now we have this question, and I'll go ahead and scroll down so we can consider it. Why are there some Gospels or books that are not canon? Well, this kind of comes along the idea that early Christians didn't agree on what was scripture and what wasn't. They all had different things they would read and they would believe. Some may have read the Gospel of Luke and have thought it was scripture. Some may have read all of the Gospels and thought they were scripture. Some may have read some of these Gospels at Nag Hammadi and thought they were the real scripture. So pretty much you just have a disagreement about what is true scripture, and in time, one viewpoint wins out. And this viewpoint that wins out is the viewpoint of the 4 Gospels that we have now. And that one viewpoint, the people who thought that the 4 Gospels we have now, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that those are scripture, clearly they didn't think that these other Gospels were scripture. Why? They thought that these other books were misleading or inappropriate to teach or include in biblical teachings. So they considered these other books and Gospels to sometimes even be heresy. They thought that some of these other books and Gospels were heretical, and they didn't agree with them. And so, of course, if you don't agree with something and you think it's kind of offensive to your religious viewpoints, you're not going to include it in your reading list. And that's exactly what happened here. You had certain Christians who ended up winning out. They were able to kind of agree on what scripture they wanted, and the scripture that they didn't agree with or they thought was offensive to their viewpoints, they just didn't include it. And so that's why we have this canon. There are other reasons as well. Some books don't seem to have solid authorship. So we don't know who wrote them. And, whoops, I misspelled don't. We don't know who wrote these books, some of these books. We also don't know if they're very reliable. So considering what is in canon, the idea of does it match other scripture / Old Testament, and how does that conform with what we know? So here you get this general idea of what happens. I would also consider you to think of the bishop's festal letters that had a canon list of the 27 books we read today. So those are all really important. These are all